Oh, welcome everybody. And this is the official launch of our Thursday night chat with me. At least I know Lucy did it last week. And as always, I do want to thank everybody for chiming in, watching. And afterward, we're going to have some question and answer. Those of you watching at home, thank you for watching this recorded the version of it. Obviously, you won't be able to ask questions, but this is me, really briefly, in case you want to know. And this is the book I co-wrote, one of those complete idiots guide books, like the dummies guide books to marathon training. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, looks kind of like an ugly slide. Um, that's the fuel your body uses. ATT, meaning tri is three, right? Phosphate, phosphate is phosphate. That's a chemical. Honest to God, I don't know what the hell adenosine is, but I think it's the name of somebody who found this or something. At any rate, triphosphate, three phosphate molecules, and one breaks away from the other two, and an electron fires out. So your body is generally, this is the fuel your body uses. Your body is generally a nuclear reactor firing off, just like nuclear reactors. You're splitting atoms inside your body. I know this is hard to believe. You're splitting atoms inside your body of phosphate, which, it's not radiation, and you're firing off an explosion of an electron. Um, if your skin was clear or opaque, you really would glow in the dark. That's why when you move and when you move faster, you warm up. And it doesn't matter if it's really, really cold outside. If you get started running, I'm sure you've all experienced this, you start warming up. It's because you are firing off electrons and generating heat because you are a nuclear reactor. You really are. If we humans could figure out how to do this in our world as opposed to inside our bodies, energy problem solved. Um, it is an amazing thing, our bodies. It really is. I am utterly fascinated by the more I learn. There are three predominant resources that we use for fuel. One is creatine phosphate, which you only have about 7, 8 seconds of. I've heard as much as 10 seconds, maybe pro athletes. I don't know. But we're not pro athletes. So you only got a few seconds. And even as a pro athlete, you're really talking about sprinters. Sprinters use creatine phosphate. You're talking about high power. If 100,000 years ago, if something with big teeth and big claws were chasing after you, you'd be using creatine phosphate. Football players that run really hard for short couple seconds, you'll note football games, the play is just a few seconds, then they stop. They regenerate more creatine phosphate. It takes about 2 minutes to regenerate 85%, which is why they then go on the bench. Football is all about creatine phosphate and high intensity, high power for very short periods of time. Glycogen, this is that limited reservoir that you use a slightly higher heart rate, which we'll get into in a minute. Glycogen starts as carbohydrate. It goes into your bloodstream. Your bloodstream is blood glucose or blood sugar, whatever you want to call it. And then it goes right into the muscle and it resides in the muscle as glycogen. And this is the big ticket item that we talk about when we burn out, when we crash, we burn, we hit the wall. That's what we're talking about, running low on glycogen. There's a lecture I do later on where we talk about overriding limiters of glycogen, but that's a whole neurological thing. That's later in the season. Just ignore that for now. Right now, we really need early season to work on consumption, a more efficient consumption of fat, which I don't care if you're the skinniest Kenyan on the planet, we all have an abundant reservoir of fat to slowly walk a marathon. I've met people that have backpacks of food and they start their marathon and they're walking and they're eating and they're walking and man, they have a great time. It's like a giant picnic and they finish in 8, 10 hours, maybe longer, 12 hours, and good to go. But fat is another resource for fuel that we all have. If at low heart rate, we use more of it. Higher heart rate, we use more glycogen. And I cannot emphasize that enough on those hills early on in the LA Marathon. They are designed to burn you out because you got tons of glycogen, you got tons of energy. You hit those hills, man, right out of the bat. You're kicking butt, you're running past your friends, you're getting ahead of your pace group, your pace leader. There are balloons, there's music blaring. You hear LA blasting over the loudspeakers, that 80s song. Every year, that's where they start the LA Marathon. Unbelievable energy, and you burn out all that glycogen on those uphills in the first 6 miles, and you're a little tired, and you suddenly realize, oh my God, I just hit sunset. I'm at like beyond 10K, and I got about 20 miles to go. I am in trouble. So don't do that. With that, let us continue. Really quick, you don't really need to know this, I suppose, but fat and glycogen go through a system in your body called the Krebs cycle. You utilize, there are three things that we develop at low heart rate that benefit this Krebs cycle in some degree. The biggest one would be mitochondria. Mitochondria are these little factories inside every cell of your body. Every cell of your body has one of these things. They take fat, they take carbohydrate in the form of glycogen, as you're looking on the screen, and they turn it into ATP, this fuel of phosphate, three phosphate molecules. Three phosphate molecules, the one breaks away from the other two. By the way, it's taken me years to get my hand to be able to do that. I just thought I'd point that out. Then creatine phosphate is developed into ATP. Like I said, only like 7, 8 seconds of it for you till you run out or run low on it. Through a whole different system called the phosphagen system, the other fat and carbs Krebs cycle. You don't really need to know that, but I just throw that in there. Really to prove a point, sprinters are sprinters, creatine phosphate. Distance runners, fat, little carbs, are distance runners. I once heard Carl Lewis, the famous gold medal sprinter, I think he got 9 or 10 gold medals in the Olympics, say, quote unquote, he said this in person at a Nike store, although we are Asics and we thank Asics for sponsoring us. But he happened to be at a Nike store many years ago, and he said, and I quote, I am not a runner. And what he meant was sprinting, you're utilizing a whole different system, whole different set of resources for fuel. He would run, a little over 10 seconds for a 100 meter. So he was almost entirely on creatine phosphate. And then the last few seconds, at best, his body would turn on glycogen. And sprinters, actually, if you watch them, and it's been scientifically studied, I can't speak, it's been scientifically studied that sprinters actually slow down the last few seconds of the 100 meters or 200, whatever, because they're switching from creatine phosphate, which makes them faster, a faster resource for fuel, to glycogen, which makes them a little bit slower. So very interesting. We are not sprinters. Don't even try and sprint during training. It won't help you very much. You may engage some faster muscles or recruit some dormant faster muscles, which is good, but you risk injury going so much faster. There you go. So creatine phosphate, we already talked about that. I'm going to just zip through that. Um, Glycogen, like I said, you're using it more at high heart rate. This is really 5K, 10K run. We are using more glycogen than fat. But here's the key. You have about 80, 90 minutes of glycogen before the non-pro athlete. Now, you can train to increase this time period. Pro athletes can go as much as 2 hours of just high heart rate, all out glycogen. You'll note pro athletes who win a marathon may do so only a little over 2 hours. So if you got somebody that's going to go 2 hours and 5 minutes and they're going meaning sub 5 minute pace, like 440, or if you're really like international level 422 or something, per minute per mile pace, try and do that for a few steps. 422 minute per mile pace. Try and do that on your watch while you're for a couple seconds. No way in heck. Anyway, they do the whole marathon that way. But the point being is they have about 2 hours of glycogen. And if their run is like 2:05 and they keep their first mile or so a little slower, I've heard marathon commentators, so they're going out slow. What's wrong? They're just starting slow. No, they're saving up because they know they got this 2 hour window where they're going to kick their butts and they can go really high heart rate and really burn up all that glycogen at higher heart rate going faster. They want to start out using as much fat as they can. And I say the same to all of you, where we only have 80, 90 minutes. And if you got a couple hours, which we do, we non-pro athletes, our fastest runner last year with a sign came in at 2:54:01. Unbelievable, but still, that's way longer than 80, 90 minutes. So we need to utilize fat as a resource for fuel for a long period of time. Too high heart rate, too fast. Early on, sure, you'll feel great. Later on, you'll hit the wall. And no, here's another thing. And later on in the season, I'll talk about this. Calculate late in the season, do this when you really know what your race pace is, because how would you really know what your race pace is yet? Figure out where you're going to be, because you got this whole season, 6 months of training ahead of you, and you'll train as a person. You'll be different fitness wise. So figure out where you're going to be with 80, 90 minutes left to go in the race before the finish line, right? So until that 80, 90 minute point, hold back to save glycogen. I want to get bumper stickers that say, save the glycogen, right? And save it a little to the end. Keep taking in carbs in the form of gels or a sport drink or gummy bears or whatever it is. I use baby food. Mulched fruit is baby food. It's a great resource for carbohydrate. They come in little packets with little plastic knobs on top. They fit in your pocket just like gels, sort of, maybe a little bigger, but what the heck? That's what I do. Everybody is different. Everybody has something that they can do to take in carbohydrate and not something less than a solid form. You can't do solids as easily while running or walking or walking even at a slightly higher heart rate. Your stomach won't digest things as efficient. That's why we do gels and sport drink and all that stuff to get carbs and minerals and all instead of eating solids, which you'll get the horrible stomach ache from probably. But hi. Anyway, hi. Anyway, my wife just came home. Figure out where you are with 80, 90 minutes. You'll find on training, if you're going too fast, generally speaking, you start to see people burn out after 100 minutes. So a little beyond that 90 minutes, you'll see them suddenly walking slowly. And I don't mean like our walkers walking, but I mean like just I'm burned out. I just suddenly it ends and your body shuts you down. That's what hitting the wall is. So usually that'll occur in training for somebody going a little too fast, maybe high end zone 3, high end, low end zone 4, a little around that, almost at that threshold pace. That's where you see them walking. I mean, slow, at about 100 minutes in training. They just need to go back a group. Just slow it down. You'll be great. You'll be fine. Just slow it down a little bit. Good to go. Whoops. Here we go. Fat, again, lower heart rate. It's what we call aerobic, carbohydrate only. You get to a point where you're not using fat at all. That's anaerobic. That's only using carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. Aerobic, you're using more fat than carbs. Sitting here right now, I'm using some carbs in the form of glycogen, but not as much as if I were jogging or running or sprinting or whatever. I shouldn't say sprinting. Anyway, you want to be able to talk fluidly without stopping for breathing. That's a definition of easy pace. We also call it conversational pace, zone 2. Same thing, easy pace. That's where most of your training is. That's where you build these things to utilize fat more efficiently. Mitochondria, which I mentioned, oxidative enzymes to utilize fat more efficiently, and uh, um, the smallest veins and arteries that go in and out of your muscle, which are called capillaries. For some reason, I couldn't get that word out of my mouth. Capillary veins and arteries you develop at low heart rate. So all of those things make you more efficient and, yes, in a way, can make you faster because you have greater fitness on the marathon itself. But high heart rate work will really raise the bar and even raise the bar where you're still using fat on those threshold runs. That's why threshold runs may be the more efficient way to get faster than interval and repetition paces, which are faster, but threshold will raise that bar where you're still using fat. So you have this bigger reservoir at higher speeds, higher intensity, really. It's a feeling you can go forever. That's what marathon runners who do 100 milers, they're walking where they could be running marathons. The 100 miler ultra, they're walking up mountains and down, and a big chunk of what they do is walking and running in between, sort of. Anyway, just a graph. It shows as your heart rate goes up and up and up, you use more glycogen and less fat. Whoops. Somehow that didn't work. All right, there you go. And less fat. All right. Lower heart, as your heart rate goes down and down and down, you're using less glycogen and you're using more fat. I don't know why this is not working. Anyway, there you go. So much for my cool little graphic that didn't really completely work. How am I getting this? Oh, I'm not sure. Hang on. Let me do this. There we go. Perfect. Um, Energy resource training. I already talked about this. Aerobic, more oxygen, more fat. You need oxygen to utilize fat as a resource for fuel. If you're not using oxygen, you're not using fat, you're using carbs in the form of glycogen. So that's aerobic. Anaerobic, without oxygen, obviously just carbs, because you need oxygen to utilize fat. Race pace. You don't know what race pace is until you get there. Race pace is a little faster for runners only. Race pace, marathon race pace we're talking about, is about a minute to a minute and a half slower than easy pace. Excuse me. Marathon race pace is a minute to a minute and a half faster than your easy pace range. Look at all those signs. Look at easy pace for runners I'm talking to. Your easy pace range, your training pace is about a minute to a minute and a half slower than marathon race pace. Why? Because you get the same physiological benefits, those capillary veins and arteries, oxidative enzymes, mitochondria, all from lower heart rate as you do marathon race pace and less risk of injury from going slower, less pounding, slower. Got it? So why would anyone want to do all their training at marathon race pace when you can do it with less risk of injury and get the same physiological and neurological benefits? Get the picture? Good. Pace is meaningless. I refer to pace as a four-letter word. Because when you're going up, as I said, when you're going up a hill, your heart rate's going up, you're utilizing more carbohydrate. That's what it's all about. It's not about pace. When you're going down a hill, you can go a little faster, your heart rate will be a little lower. You're using a little more fat on the downhill if you stay slow. That's what it's all about. It's about carbs and fat and getting to the finish line without hitting the wall. It's really marathoning can be a mathematical equation. How fast can you go before you run out of carbs? How many carbs can you take in and minerals and hydration, water, all of those things before you hit the wall, you burn out and crash. It's really a mathematical equation, different for every individual. Um, and that's pretty much where I'm going to stop. We already talked about fats and all that, and anaerobic versus aerobic, and heart rates, are anaerobic and aerobic and all that. Lactate threshold, these are old terms we don't really use anymore. And this is next week's lecture. So with that, thank you and good night.